Technology is a fun thing, and that's how we lose entire podcast recordings. I'm sure you have all been there. All right, guys, welcome everybody to the Hearthstone panel of World of Podcast, sponsored by Medieval Times and Wowhead. I hope you guys are having a wonderful evening tonight. And, of course, we have an amazing panel of some of the best Hearthstone podcasters in the world. And yes, I say that with a period at the end of the sentence because you guys are amazing. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And Jocelyn, go ahead and let's get going.
I can actually start this time? All right, cool.
Take two. You got it now.
No one saw the last part. It's totally fine. So hello, everyone. I am Jocelyn Kearney. I am from The Angry Chicken. It's one of the longest-running Hearthstone podcasts. We've been going over 6 years now covering the game of Hearthstone. And joining me tonight, I have Steve.
Hey, so I'm Steve. I go by Wicked Good. I do a podcast called Off Curve, which I record from my car on the way home from the train station. Have not yet killed any pedestrians. Hoping to keep that streak going. I also, if you play in the Masters Tour qualifiers, I also do a lot of the dashboards that people have been sharing. So those are also at offcurve.com, which is where all my stuff is.
He's how I sound smart on Angry Chicken, by the way.
It means
I'm like,
a lot.
oh yeah, you guys want to know the Masters Tour meta. I got this down, don't worry. Not actually me. It's
That makes all the hours of yelling at Tableau worth it.
And then also with me tonight, I have Mage.
Hi, I'm Dwayne. I go by Mageadeath. I'm on a podcast called Dr. 3. We actually just started middle of the year trying to help people get better on standard ladder.
Awesome. Next up, we have Andrew.
Hey, I'm Andrew. I do a podcast called The Happy Hearthstone, which is actually the longest running Hearthstone podcast in the history of space and time and cards. So it's good to be with you all.
Very, very happy to have you. And then we have someone we just had on Angry Chicken, actually. DeckTech is here with us tonight as well.
Hey guys, I am
Got some fans in the crowd.
Yes, got my fan club here. I don't have a podcast. I just show up on everyone else's. So I have a few more stops to make, but we're getting there. And happy to be here.
And rounding out the panel tonight, we have Bot. Welcome.
Hi, I go by Botticus. I'm on the Coin Concede podcast, where a podcast all about making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you.
Excellent. So here's our wonderful Hearthstone panel. So I thought we'd start things off tonight just kind of talking about 2019 because I think, I didn't put this to the panel. I'm just going to speak for everyone here and saying 2019 was probably the best year that we've had in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Yes? So I just kind of want to go down the panel here and talk a little bit about what your favorite part of 2019 was. I mean, we saw so many changes to Hearthstone. They seem to be a little bit more of like an agile team this year, willing to try things, willing to make changes. So what were some of your favorite moments from 2019?
Yeah, I think the favorite thing that I had was just that they, for once, left us not knowing what to expect. And that's a really good thing. Like, we got into a pretty clear cadence of this is when we're going to get the set, and then we're going to cry about balance changes for a while. We're not going to get them. Eventually we'll cry some more, then maybe we'll get them, but only half of what we wanted. And then all of a sudden they started changing classic cards, and we started getting buffs to cards. And I may not agree with all the changes that they're making, but I love the fact that they're trying different things. And it makes me, there was a long time, and I was listening back to this panel from last year, and just like that was right after like the In the Works blog post, and when tournament mode got canceled like a couple weeks before, and everybody was kind of grumbling and very unsure what was going on with the game. And I don't feel that way. I feel like the team has really been going out of their way to do different things and make the game feel fresh. They don't always hit, but at least they're open-minded in a way that it doesn't feel like they were in the past.
Very, very true. I think, at least for me personally, the biggest surprise of the year was buffs, because that was one of the things that the Hearthstone team, like Team 5, have been adamant, like, we will not buff cards. Buffing cards is too hard. We like to nerf things, and then we don't have to worry about the problems they create. And it was just like, so then they were like, and we're buffing these like 20 cards. Like, wait, what? Okay, what have you done with Team 5? Like, are you in trouble? Do you need me to call the police, Team 5? Is that what's happening right now? Are you reaching out for help? Because it was out of nowhere at all. So yeah, buffs for me were huge. Mage, what about you? What was your favorite moment from 2019?
I think my favorite moment actually was, I think we saw a really good execution on at least the first two expansions and a continued storyline. I really liked the idea of a story that starts at the beginning of the year and then goes all the way through the year. And I really...
Even though we don't know the
Even though we
conclusion
don't
yet?
know what the conclusion is. And I'm really hoping it's going to be good and not like some sort of switcheroo like you see sometimes in World of Warcraft. But I liked the flavor of the expansions, and I like how well they went together, and it made me excited and wanting to play not just the cards, but the single player content as well. Just it worked,
I was
and
gonna
just
say,
all
yeah,
the way through.
Did the single player really come into it for you? Because I know like their ability to tell a story, even not only through the actual single player content, but then the events that they ran too, like the Midsummer thing, was really, really well done. It's like, oh, all of a sudden they're running Dalaran into Blackrock Mountain because why not?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the single player really came into it. Andrew, what about you?
Well, to continue on that, Tavern Brawls have also stepped up big time, specifically the Midsummer Fire Festival. I mean, we saw people
Festival, that's what it was.
The
I'm like, Evo was in there. What was it?
I mean, we saw people like not caring about the ladder for like 7 full days because they just wanted to get their time a little bit closer. And the fact that we were getting rewards through that also, unlocking cards and stuff, I mean, that was really fun. So honestly, my answer was going to be the flavor because I think that they have nailed that. And the only other thing I'll say is just revisiting characters also. Boomsday Project was the first time we saw, okay, we've had enough history in the game of Hearthstone that we can come back to something. And now this whole year, I mean, the entire League of Evil, the League of Explorers, it's just been one thing after another. So I have high anticipations for some more return of beloved characters for the
Oh, interesting. We're getting ahead of ourselves. It's not prediction time yet, guys. Come on. What about you, Nick?
I think all of that stuff you guys said was great. My answer probably would have been the same as Steve's answer, but so that we give a varied and interesting panel. I also really loved the theme song that we just got, because that thing, play that on repeat all day. It was quite the jam. So in addition to the exploring new design space and everything, trying out new things, great story. I thought they should have done that from when they first announced that they were doing the year of the blank. I thought it was weird that that meant nothing, essentially, except just to remember which sets were in which year, I guess. So I'm glad that it feels like a lot of different things are coming together, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes together next.
And what about you, Bot? What was your favorite thing of 2019?
Well, I think everybody made some really good points, but I think for me, for the majority of the last year, the standard's actually been pretty good. Like, up until pretty recently, I would say, the meta's been pretty good. It feels like you've had a lot of variation and a good amount of different decks that you can play. I've enjoyed it, at least, and I think it goes to show that a bit of variability, like having them making more consistent nerfs sooner and like reacting to things, I think has paid off for the most part.
Yeah, I think that comes back to the like agility, and on the subject of the meta, something that none of you mentioned and I'm really, really curious about is the shift that we had this year away from a focus on tour stops towards the Grandmaster system. So how do you feel, and I'm gonna start with you and we're gonna come back down this way again. With Grandmasters, did you feel like that was a hit? Was it a miss? Was it something you were watching every week? Did it make a difference even when they changed format? Because I know me personally, I watched like none of season 1. I could not get into Specialist, and then season 2 started, and it was like every weekend. I didn't catch all 3 days, but I was catching something every weekend, which was not, like I was making time for Hearthstone esports in a way that I never really had in the season 1 of Grandmasters. So Bot, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this year's esports?
Yeah, so when Grandmasters kind of started, I wasn't super keen on Specialist, but I was willing to at least give it a chance. I kind of watched a little bit towards the start and realized it just really wasn't the format and what I had in mind of what I think like a Hearthstone tournament is about, just because I feel like the multi-class system is such a core part of competitive Hearthstone that I was really happy when they switched to Shielded Conquest, which is even the little bit of variation that it has on the Conquest format, I think was really good, and ended up watching quite a bit more Grandmasters after they made that change. And I think they still have a long ways to go to get it to the point where I would be very comfortable calling it a very good product, but I think they're on their way to, I think they're making good decisions. Mostly good decisions.
We won't go too far down that rabbit hole. But Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I think what Grandmasters did very well was setting up those storylines and letting us get to know the players. And I know Joss and probably a couple of the rest of you, like myself, were just like devastated when Orange basically learned that he was going to be relegated. And I think that was kind of the point of this system, and I think it did a really good job of that. On the flip side, I think the things that it could work on is the difficulty in getting from that second tier up into the Grandmasters tier. And there were a lot of pro players and semi-pro players who in years prior in the HCT system and stuff could consider themselves pro or aspiring pro Hearthstone players, and a lot of them kind of felt like there was no space for them anymore in the system. And I think that that's a flaw, just both in terms of I'd like to see these players who I know and enjoy watching them play do well, but also in terms of when designing a esport overall. I think one of the powerful aspects for drawing in viewership is that connection where the viewer can say, I can be one of those people. And so by taking away that path, I think that was a misstep, and they're looking at stuff. Obviously now we're getting with the relegations and the promotions, we're kind of mixing in a few more of those people, and so it's starting to get there, but it's still like you have to spike one tournament and then wait a year, or I'm not actually even sure how it's going to work after this first one, but it feels like there's that disconnect, and I think that's where that was.
So what's interesting is like I totally relate with you, Joss, that like Grandmasters, it was like, okay, if you'll give me packs, I guess I'll have it on, but I don't actively want to watch this.
Yeah, then you have it on, but it's actually like a muted tab, and you're like, yeah, I'm totally watching Blizzard.
But the big change happened 3 weekends of this year, and that's Masters Tour qualifiers for exactly the reason you just said, storylines. Like, if you remember the DreamHack tours that we used to have, like DreamHack Denver, for example, where Ike went undefeated with Big Spell Mage, which was not even a thing back then. Like, those are the stories I enjoy watching Hearthstone for. And this kind of translates into professional sports for me, where like I want to watch the collegiate who actually have something to prove, and don't want to see the guys who are just getting paid absurd amounts of money. I want to see the young bucks who have to prove themselves and get in there. But I love how Master Tour qualifiers have combined the two, because it gives those Grandmasters a chance to prove themselves. Not that they have anything to prove, because they're all fantastic. But put them up against the young up-and-comers and see who comes to the top. And everyone has a fair chance. And that's really what I've enjoyed. And I want to see more of that.
And what's kind of cool is they have proven themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the Grandmasters are doing pretty well. The ones who are actually competing in the Masters Tour, we have Dog won the first one. And then we just had, what's-his-face won the most recent one. and
Eddie.
Thank you. Yes, Eddie. and they're all doing... Not all of them, but a lot of them are doing really well in the stuff. So that's kind of cool to show that they, even though the Grandmasters has that stigma of it's the streamer league, some people call it, at the same time, these players earn their way up there, and they're showing
They're there for a reason, for sure.
Yeah, very, very true. Mage, what about you? Have you paid a lot of attention to esports this year?
Honestly, I couldn't get into it. Like you were saying, the season one, the specialist format. When I think of pro players, I think of people that can play all different types of decks and can play them at an especially high level. And I always thought it was interesting while watching these players like switch from game to game to these different to these different decks, and you weren't seeing that. You were seeing who can prepare the best tech for what was coming in. And there's definitely some interesting play and counterplay to that. But once they went to the Conquest, it got more interesting to me. But the tour stops, like you're talking about, Andrew, that's what's interesting. That's what I want to see. I want to see people I've never seen before coming up and being in that top 8, and being excited about it too. Seeing these people when they're on Twitter, like, I made the top 8. It's just that's the stuff I like watching and seeing people excited, and it just, I don't know, it just
You
didn't,
lose
it
that
didn't,
a
it
little
didn't,
in
it
the
didn't feel
league
like there
system.
was that same sense of urgency or
Yeah.
or that level of excitement from just the regular seasons.
Yeah. Now, Steve, I know you obviously have covered a lot of the 3 Masters Tour stops that we've had this year. Do you have a preference in terms of, like we had almost a tour stop every weekend last year, and then this year we had 3. So it was a huge drop in the number of tour stops. Do you like, which do you like better? Do you think there's a better balance to strike?
I think the problem
Is 3 enough work?
I don't think, I missed like the first 2 rounds of every Masters Tour because I'm just like furiously coding and like refreshing the dashboard until it starts working. But I think that it's not really enough because you see like, I'm ecstatic for Language Hacker that he got into Grandmasters because I know how hard
Because he's
worked.
Canadian.
Yeah.
That's why we're all cheering for him, right?
But it's like, it was really close, and it shouldn't have been that close because someone like him should be able to show consistency. And you can't show consistency over 3 tournaments that, first of all, you're just having to spike a qualifier. And even like the way that they're set up now is better than it was. At least they're not 15 hours, but you still have to go like 9, 10, and 0. And that's just sometimes not going to happen. This is a game with variance. And the problem with Grandmasters is it's choked out all the third-party tournaments. Like, nobody's going to try to put on a DreamHack if there's Grandmasters every weekend, and Grandmasters is offering people hacks to watch, and they're not, right? So I would love to see some sort of a balance, and maybe with the off-season we can get that a little bit more, where there's room for the third-party tournaments to come in, maybe have their earnings included in the numbers that are being added up for the Masters Tour, so that it can feel like it's not just somebody who spikes a tournament or 2 that gets in, but it's more like an overall, year-long accomplishment to get elevated into that level, which is, I think, what we really felt like at the end of HCT last year. It felt like those were the folks that got into Worlds. And I'm not saying that the Grandmasters this year aren't necessarily that, but I feel like, or even that the people who got into Grandmasters this year aren't that, but it feels like, it doesn't feel like it's as consistent of a thing. It's like somebody did really well and they would deserve to be rewarded for that, but it should be more of a, there's not enough of a sample size there.
Yeah, there was something to be said about last year's system with just the constant accumulation of points. And I know it was really hard on players, and obviously all the travel was just so terrible for them because not only do you have the actual, like, you're traveling all over the world and jet lag, time zones, all the rest of it, but someone's got to foot that bill. And unless you're placing first or second in every single tour stop, like, you're putting a lot of that out of your pocket. Like, you're not making money being a Hearthstone pro, which is probably not the way the system should work. So I think that there's something to be said about the story and the consistency of like seasons of point accumulations instead of just the, win a tournament, get an invite to the Masters Tour. Like, there's got to be a balance there. Because I agree, like, a lot of the other stories we lost. We had the Grandmaster story, but a lot of the tour stuff was really, really hard to follow. And we're to the point that we're going to, third-party, like, fan-created websites, spreadsheets, everything else, just to try to figure out what the heck is happening in the 4 months in between these tour stops, because we have no idea.
Yeah, and the other thing is just that we don't get, we just don't get the, actually forgot where I was going with that, but
But we don't
Right.
have
yes. But yeah, I mean, it's great for me because, people are coming to my site, but it shouldn't be this hard to get this data out either.
Yeah.
And, there needs to be a better way to do this. Or what I was going to say is that you have to fly yourself out to one of these places even to compete. So, like, if you can't afford to fly yourself to Bucharest, does that mean that you should be excluded from being a Grandmaster?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, if you're not at least going to pay for everyone to go out there and be able to compete, that's, then you're already kind of putting another barrier in front of those people. There needs to be a little bit of a better way. It's better than just, well, we pick these people and here you go and these are your Grandmasters, but there's room to improve there.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to take a little bit of time now because Hearthstone, I have been on a plane all day, so this might have changed. But as far as I know, Hearthstone is one of the only Blizzard properties right now that has no leaks out there. So we actually get to speculate with nothing hanging over our heads. So We're pretty sure it's dragons because it's Year of the Dragon, and we haven't seen much dragons. So it's not too much of a stretch to assume we're going to be getting some dragons. But Mage, I think you were talking a little bit about the story and the through line, so do you want to kind of kick it off here and talk a little bit about what you think we might see tomorrow?
What I think we might see, or what I'm hoping to see.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
I think there's going to be dragons. I think we saw with the teaser on Monday, we saw Dragon Blight, we saw Wormrest Temple. I think even the panel from the Year of the Dragon at the beginning of the year had a tooth at the bottom. It had fire. It had this like goldish bronze looking thing, and so it's like even though that name is sort of just the name of to kind of help keep in your mind what the expansions were this year, we need dragons. I think everybody likes dragons, and I think everybody wants to be playing with dragons, and we haven't had any, and we have a lot of really good dragons in the game, but there's so much more that we could be doing with them. Reprinting cards. I stand by Nozdormu. I want a playable Nozdormu. I don't care. That's the first golden I got, and I still want to play him. But there's just...
That's kind of a theme that we've seen kind of running through this year of Hearthstone has been kind of bringing back characters we've been familiar with in the past. So I think that's maybe the direction we can say the next expansion might take, is that, maybe we see a revamp of these dragons. Andrew, what do you think?
So I am not WoW efficient in my lore, but obviously I had.
It's okay. I got
I'm sorry.
I got you.
I had to do my research, and I learned about Galakron. Is that his name? Or
Galakron.
Galakron. That's a pretty sick dragon, and we have. So I don't know.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah. So obviously, like returning characters, we got to see Deathwing. Like everyone's been saying that since the day we saw that teaser back in March or whatever. So I think that
There's already 2 Deathwings. We need 2.
But we had 3 Dr. Booms, so I think there's room for a third.
And they wouldn't have released the Heroes Deathwing if there wasn't some sort of a tie-in, probably.
Ooh, interesting. Cross-game theory we got going on.
The other thing that crossed my mind is that I think it was this year that they redid the starter pack for Hearthstone and gave you a guaranteed classic Dragon Legendary. Wink, wink. But I think it would be cool, honestly, if we saw a new Nozdormu, a new Onyxia, a new Ysera. It'd be fun to see all of them kind of take different. And I was unaware of some of the other ones that we got this year, like Kalagos and Nozari.
I have a golden Nozari that is sat in my collection and not made it into a deck at all. I would love for that to be a thing. I'm not keeping my hopes up.
So I think they've been sneakily kind of putting these in here and there, but yeah, we got to see them bust down the walls. Brightwing is great. There's a place for it, but I want to see the big, baddest dragons of Azeroth come.
Yeah. What about you, Bot? You've been a little bit quiet down on the end. Any thoughts and predictions?
So I'm used to being wrong, so we'll say...
That's okay. We get to
We'll
be
say
wrong
no
here. It's the
dragons.
last day we can be wrong.
Honestly, the best theory that I heard that I really enjoyed was actually another podcast called Walk to Work, and unfortunately the Blister guy couldn't make it all the way out from Australia to be here, but he talked about potentially the destruction of the classic set if like Deathwing is part of it.
Ooh, cataclysm.
And maybe possibly a rotation of the classic set would be kind of interesting.
Now
And I
that's
really
just
like
crazy
that
talk.
theory. I mean, they just brought all these cards back from Wild. Maybe they're trying to test out the potential to have a rotating classic set, which a lot of us have been asking for a while.
Definitely. It's really hard when you're, watching either esports or you're playing on the ladder and you're just like, oh, okay, we're going to get like Sap and Backstab and Abyss and then Edwin. Yay, this is original. This hasn't been around forever. So yeah, I am totally on board with we need to do something about the basic classic set, because as much as it's iconic, at the same time, it's getting a little long in the tooth at this point. So we can make some changes, I think. We'll be okay with that. I think we're going to take a couple minutes here, open it up for some questions from you guys.
Absolutely. So, really quick, big thanks to our panelists for their conversation so far. You guys are awesome. And if anybody has a question that they would like to ask the panelists, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll pass the mic around and have some great new conversations in the back. And then right over there.
Hi, first time caller, long time listener. With the release of changing the classic card, some of the classic cards from Wallet into standard, are there any cards in classic that you wish they had done, or that are in Wallet that you would wish they had done, rather than the ones that they chose? Like, I know Ragnaros is a good choice, but is there any that you would have wanted them to bring back?
I got one for sure.
Go ahead.
Lotheb is one of my favorite cards ever. I would have liked to have seen him in the bunch. And I know you probably thought about this because I asked you on your bonus episode.
What did I say? I don't remember that long ago. The only problem I see with Lotheb is Quest Shaman. I don't think I'd look too forward to playing against
Like
Lotheb
eight
in the pool
Lothebs during the game.
and then Shutter walking it later. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know that
you
I'd
could
be a
also
huge
do
fan of
the
that.
double hero power Lotheb, bouncer Lotheb back. That would be pretty bad.
Definitely hadn't thought about that interaction. That's gross. Because I was totally on board with Lotheb. Lotheb would have been one of my choices too, because we saw his effect come back in Paladin with Rebuke, but it never really went anywhere because you tie that effect to a body, and a big beefy body at that, that's going to be way better as opposed to just a spell. So I was kind of sad that Rebuke didn't see a lot of play, and I was really sad that Lotheb didn't come back. But now you mentioned Shaman and Shutterwalk, and I just threw up in my mouth a little. So we're not going to talk about Lotheb anymore.
But if I had to choose a card, I think one of my favorite cards that never saw a ton of play outside of Quest Rogue, which